If you've been playing WoW for quite a while now, you've probably realized that Crow has a way of getting you attached to almost every character that gets released due to splendid character designs and addictive gameplay mechanics and animations. This might not be an issue for whales because they can afford to pull for every single character plus a couple of their sequences, but for dolphins and free-to-play, it could be problematic for their account if they do not have a proper strategy in place that can help them make informed decisions whenever they decide to pull for any new character, which is exactly why I decided to make this video. As some of you guys may already know, I've made guides for almost every single character in the game, and I started playing WoW from day one, so there are a ton of information that I've gathered from my experience as a player and as a creator regarding how to build a strong account that is future-proof, which will be very beneficial especially to new players who are still figuring stuff out and do not have a strong account to beat all the endgame modes yet. This video will be divided into 4 sections, including obtaining must-have units in the game, building your account around your favorite characters, which is strongly recommended, team variety for your favorite characters, and lastly, future-proofing your account. If this video proves helpful or enjoyable in any way, be sure to leave a like and subscribe because it helps me out tremendously. Let's begin with obtaining must-have units in WoW. There are 3 types of teams that I personally recommend in WoW depending on your playstyle preference, which includes Hypercarry, Double DPS, and Quickswap. Hypercarry is the most common playstyle, which I'm sure a lot of you guys are familiar with, involving your healing buffer like Verena and Shorekeeper, sub DPS buffer like Yanlin, and lastly your main DPS character like Zhangli Yao. Double DPS includes a healing buffer and 2 DPS characters like Brandt and Carlotta. And lastly, we have Quickswap, which involves a healing buffer like Verena and 2 DPS characters like Calculator and Changli. But the difference between Quickswap and Double DPS is the playstyle that is involved, where the player takes advantage of long animations by swapping to another character to do something else. So Quickswap teams are a different variations of Double DPS team compositions. With all the teams that I mentioned, you can clearly see a pattern where healing buffers like Verena and Shorekeeper are always included in the team compositions, and that's because of the insane value that they provide, including offensive and defensive capabilities. Healing buffers like Shorekeeper and Verena have an outro skill that buffs all type damage amplification by 15%, making them incredibly versatile. Damage amplification effects also increases your damage quite significantly because it has its own separate multiplier on WoW's damage equation. The most important part is that these outro buffs last for 30 seconds, which means that it can last long enough regardless of the aforementioned teams that you decide to play, including Hypercarry, Double DPS, and Quickswap. Shorekeeper's crit rate and crit damage buffs from Elaboration also comes in very handy if you're low on crit rate as a result of getting trashed substats whenever you tune your echoes, making Shorekeeper one of the few characters that are immune to power creeping in my opinion, but that's a different topic for another video. This is why it's essential to prioritize getting these characters. That brings us to the next section, which is building your account around your favorite characters. The very reason any of us play WoW or any game in the first place is because we want to have a good time and have fun with friends in co-op or certain characters in the game, whether they are limited 5-star characters, standard 5-star characters, or even 4-star characters. But the idea of having fun in WoW is quite subjective. For example, some players like to see big nuke type damage, and that's why they pull for characters like Jinxie, Carlotta, and Camellia. Others might be more fascinated by gameplay mechanics, like me, who is more interested in characters like Brandt and Changli, due to how addictive their playstyle can be. Regardless of whatever reason that you use to pull for your favorite characters, you can never go wrong with any of them as far as endgame is concerned, and the reason will become clear once we get into the team variety and future-proofing of your account. The most important thing is that you enjoy that particular character's playstyle and you can see yourself playing that particular character for the longest possible time, regardless whether that particular character is a hybrid character or a damage-focused character. My recommendation is to get at least 3 of these characters along with their signature weapons if you can. With that said, let's get into the team variety. Since WoW's endgame is not heavily influenced by elements or attributes like Genshin Impact, where you need certain elements to break shields and stuff like that, team building in WoW is pretty easy, cost effective, and there are a ton of variety to choose from. There are 4 types of damage scaling in the game regardless of the role that your favorite character falls into. including basic attack damage, resonance skill damage, heavy attack damage, and resonance liberation damage. For Carlotta, her main source of dealing damage scales off resonance skill damage, so what you need to do is to target sub-DPS buffers that are concerto efficient and buffs resonance skill damage, but don't worry too much about the attribute that they belong to. The main reason your focus should be on the skill type damage scaling instead of their attribute is that outro skills from sub-DPS characters like Cantarella amplifies attribute damage, which is Havoc, by 20% and 25% resonance skill damage. Hence, the 25% resonance skill damage scaling is what makes Cantarella synergize with Carlotta. If you go on websites like Pridewin, the damage profile for characters like Carlotta contains 83% resonance skill damage, meaning that if you take her overall damage into consideration, 83% of it is considered resonance skill damage. You can see a similar trend with characters like Brant, whose overall damage contains 69% basic attack damage, and for Jinxie, it contains 75% resonance skill damage. So it makes sense to focus on sub-DPS buffers that amplifies a particular skill damage due to the high percentages as you guys can see right here, and the skill damage amplifications from outro buffs are also 5% more than the attribute damage amplification, which increases your damage dealer's DPS quite significantly. However, if the character's damage profile is like Havoc Rover, where the percentage difference between the two highest skill types is not that large, then such characters benefit more from attributes damage amplification rather than skills like basic attack damage amplification, which is why Donjin is much better than Sanhua as a sub-DPS buffer for Havoc Rover in terms of 4-star sub-DPS buffer options that you have at your disposal. 4-star sub-DPS buffers are quite viable, especially if you have their sequence 6, which mostly buffs attack by 20%, but they do not help with future-proofing your account, which brings us to the final section of this video. Future-proofing your account in the context of pulling for characters means that you're making sure that the 3 or more DPS characters that you have chosen to build and stick with for the longest possible time has what it takes to exceed DPS thresholds required for clearing the middle tower of the hazard zone and can counter anything that they might face in all types of endgame modes at S0. You can achieve this in 2 ways, including getting the dedicated support for that particular DPS character and identifying the challenges that that particular damage dealer will likely face in all types of endgame mode. Let's break down the first one much further. The reason for this is because of what defines meta and Wuwa. The characters by themselves or the attribute that they belong to are by no means meta defining, unlike Genshin Impact, where certain characters are carried by the reactions that they can perform due to the elemental type in the game that they belong to. And by meta defining, what I mean is a type of character that can beat any endgame mode without any challenges. Let's take a character like Jinxie for example. She's already one of the strongest resonators in the game, with DPS thresholds that are moderately higher than what is recommended to beat the middle tower of the hazard zone at S0 whenever it's reset. But the moment a sub-DPS buffer drops in the game that is concerto efficient, provides coordinated attacks, and amplifies spectral damage and resonance skill damage, her damage output will get a major boost such that it'll take quite a long time before HP inflation will happen for endgame enemies to counter the addition of new units that does significantly more damage than Jinxie at S0, meaning that Jinxie with her new dedicated sub-DPS buffer will remain a viable DPS to beat the Tower of Adversity for many patches to come, hence why I call it future-proof. The second way to future-proof your account is to know the challenges your DPS character will likely face in all types of endgame modes as I mentioned earlier. Let's use Carlotta as an example. She's incredible when facing single target enemies, which are usually common in the Tower of Adversity. But when it comes to Whimpering Waste, it's not really recommended because her kit design is not suitable to provide consistent damage over time in a large area of effect like Jiyan and Camellia. So what you can do to counter this issue is to get sub-DPS buffers like Cantarella that specializes in controlling mob-type enemies with Hazy Dream due to the slowdown effect, which prevents enemies from splitting up, and she can deal damage in a wide area of effect, where you can always save Carlotta's nukes for a new wave of enemies if you want to use Carlotta in Whimpering Wastes. So in case you're wondering why it's necessary to get another sub DPS buffer like Cantarella for Carlotta, even though you already have Jesse on your account, who's undoubtedly Carlotta's dedicated buffer, that is the exact reason. And I personally love Kuro's approach on how certain characters have unique synergies based on different situations, which makes team building much more versatile. The same applies to not only DPS focused characters, but hybrid characters like Brandt as well, who can do some pretty insane damage numbers with Sandhua in a single target endgame mode, but when it comes to multi-target endgame modes like Whimpering Waste, he can be paired with another hybrid character like Chang-Li to do decent and consistent damage in a large area of effect, which can significantly increase the number of points that you can get, because keep in mind that with Whimpering Waste, it doesn't really matter how big of a damage your characters can do, but rather consistent and decent damage output over time. So in summary, pull for characters that you enjoy, figure out their main source of dealing damage and its respective scaling to help you make informed decisions on which sub DPS buffers that they synergize with, and lastly, pull for a variety of sub DPS buffers that helps your DPS solve challenges that they might have with their kit design, and which one buffs their main damage source as well as their attributes to increase their DPS thresholds even at S0, making them viable for many patches to come. That pretty much sums up my ultimate guide on how to make your account unstoppable in WoWa, and you can pretty much decide not to even pull again for the longest possible time, since you can beat all types of endgame if you apply everything I said in this video. But do keep in mind that it'll take quite some time for you to build such an account if you just started playing the game very recently. So don't rush it and be sure to enjoy every aspect of the game. If YouTube got it right, you should like this video that pops up on your screen. So be sure to give it a watch and join our Discord community if you're having any issues with the game or you just want a place to chill or hang out. Link will be in the channel description. Catch you guys in the next one. Bye bye.